Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of the Board of Education. This meeting is being televised live on AACPS TV and streamed on AACPS YouTube channel. General information and protocols for the meeting are posted on the sign by the doorway as you enter the room, so please make sure you read those if you have not already done so. At this time, we'd like to ask everyone to please rise for our invocation. Oh God, we pray to administer that which is just in all educational policies, being ever mindful of your guidance. Stir us to action with love, wisdom, and understanding. And once again, if you could rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I am Vice President Robert Silkworth, and I just wanted to let everyone know that Dr. Tobin will not be able to be with us this afternoon. She's attending to some urgent family matters. And so we'd like to move on to approval of the minutes. Item 2.03.
Motion to approve.
Do you have a second? Consensus? Okay, we have approval. Item 2.04 is establish the agenda order. Motion?
Motion to approve the agenda as written.
Second?
Second.
Consensus? Okay. So we do not have any public comments on agenda items this afternoon. So we'll move on to item 4.01. We have our policy committee report. Ms. Ellis.
Miss Ellis was temporarily detained, Mr. Vice President.
Okay. All right. So we'll move on to item 4.02. Here we are. Miss Ellis is with us. Miss Ellis, item 4.01, policy committee report.
Yes, thank you. So yesterday, Policy Committee met for the first time this school year. And so I welcome the opening of a Policy Committee. Mr. Lynn, thank you for joining us. Ms. Schallheim and Dr. Tobin was there. So we discussed the schedule for the policies that are going to come before us this school year. And it is a hefty and ambitious undertaking, I think, but Ms. Wilson assured us that we should be good to go to be able to tackle all these policies, so long as federal and state requirements don't sort of interfere and put new policies in front of us that we have to take care of. And then we looked at some regulations and also a new policy on the audit that's going to come before the board, and that's about it.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Ellis. So we're going to move on to 4.02, the president's report. And so it really is an honor to provide today's report. As a teacher for 49 years, I was always excited for the very first days of school. And I know that all members of this board have recently had the chance to visit many of our Anne Arundel County schools since we opened last week. I have to tell you, visits were absolutely outstanding. As we walked through the hallways and into the classrooms to observe students and teachers, we were absolutely thrilled to see the positive interaction between our students, teachers, and staff. I made the comment that one would think that this was not the first day of school. You would have thought the teachers had been back with their students for a month or more. Students were actively engaged. They were happy to be back to school. And I know Dr. Burdell and I had the opportunity a few times to have lunch with some of the kids. they are ecstatic to be back in school. The positive relationships that we know lead to student success were evident the very first day. We know that our students, teachers, and the staff are ready to move from good to great. Parents and guardians, be proud of your children. We certainly are proud of them. We are proud of our teachers, our admin, and especially proud of all of the staff, including our bus drivers, our cafeteria workers, our crossing guards, and maintenance and custodial staff. Schools were in great shape wherever we went. Classrooms and schools in general have been so well prepared for the arrival of our students. The learning environment is superb. What a great opening. I would also like to mention that we had the pleasure to attend 3 ribbon cutting ceremonies for 3 schools: Hillsmere Elementary, Porterfield Elementary, and Rippling Woods Elementary. The excitement, the great turnout of students and parents, and the smiles that we saw on the face of the students as they were able to meet with their teachers in their new classrooms was off the charts. It was phenomenal. These visits were very inspired. So a sincere thank to everyone who played a role in this great opening. That concludes the president's report. Okay, we're going to move on to item 4.03, Superintendent's report.
Thank you, Mr. President, or Mr. Vice President. I am excited to also provide a similar report on top of the President's report. We had a phenomenal opening of school, in my opinion. I have had the honor of opening up school districts 8 years. And for me, this was by far the best opening of school week that I've had in my career as a superintendent. And I don't take that lightly. I think as you look through some of these pictures, the work of our faculty and staff, the work of our transportation department, the work of HR, the work of central office employees, and then our building principals doing the work that they needed to do to make sure that the vast majority of our schools were in good shape, allowed for us to get off to this phenomenal start. Before I talk about a particular bus driver, I want to share just some statistics with you all. I think part of the reason why we are in a much better situation this school year is because the amount of stress that has been placed on employees over the past several school years has been lessened. So right now we are sitting at 120 classroom teacher vacancies out of nearly 5,700 teachers. So we're talking about a 98% plus fill rate, which is just huge given the fact that nationally we probably have seen close to 800,000 to 1 million or so teachers across the country that are no longer in the profession. So that's a testament to the hard work of our recruiters, our HR department, our building principals in doing what they needed to do to get people to want to come and work in Anne Arundel County. That's compared to 240 last year at this time. As far as bus drivers and alternative vehicle drivers, we have 0 vacancies at this point. Last year at this time, we had 70 bus driver vacancies. We have 0. We have 0 alternative vehicle driver vacancies, which last year at this time, we didn't even have that initiative. We didn't launch that initiative until December of last year. However, we still are having bench issues. And I'll give you a quick example. This morning, there was a route that we were not able to run because we just simply don't have enough substitute bus drivers. The bus driver had to attend a funeral this morning, but will drive the evening routes. So we're talking about a half of a day of a route that didn't run, significantly improved from a year ago. And we still have 59 bus drivers that are currently going through training to get their CDLs, in addition to another 15 alternative vehicle drivers in training so that we can have a bench there as people call in. So I'm extremely proud of our transportation department, our operations department. Food service, another example of hard work going on. Last year at this time, we had 216 vacancies. We're sitting at 95 right now. We still need support with that division, but a significant reduction from where we were last year at this time. Custodians, we were 80 vacancies compared to 25 now. So I want people to know, and we're looking for 2 athletic trainers. We had 5 last year that we were vacant at this time. We only have 2. So I just want to really commend everybody that has put forth the efforts to get Anne Arundel County into this position. And because of it, morale is at a high. My job now as superintendent is to figure out how do we maintain this energy through the first 6 weeks? Because in my career in education, people tend to kind of regress back to the way things always are after the first 16 weeks. And I think we have a responsibility to try to make sure that we maintain that energy and keep everybody optimistic and excited. We started this school year off last year. I tell people I use basketball analogies because I played basketball. We were 3 against 5 last year, full court, when you think about the disparities in staffing. We're starting this school year off 5 on 5. And despite being 3 on 5 last year, when we do our data updates to the community, the district in almost every area, we have made some type of positive progress. Imagine what we're going to be able to do when we're fully staffed and we don't have the workload and the stress on people. We are on par to have a phenomenal year in Anne Arundel County. And I just once again have to thank everybody about that. Now let's talk about a bus driver that I met. I want to give a special acknowledgement to this gentleman, Andrew Ireland, because he personifies what we mean when we say belong, grow, and succeed. Mr. Ireland was a new bus driver for Overlook Elementary School last year. And in March, he started volunteering during lunch and recess after completing his morning bus runs. He would stay at Overlook until it was time for him to drive students home on his bus. He still drives a bus, but this year, the school hired him to be its lunch monitor, and he continues to build relationships with students. He even supports a few students who need additional adult support in the classroom. And I was actually in a classroom when I watched him come in to offer support. His lunch monitor shift ends at 1:15 p.m., but he stays until school dismisses and gets back on his bus. And get this, he's also a member of the PTA and attends PTA meetings for Overlook. We are very lucky to have people like Mr. Ireland helping our students and our schools. So I really wanted to extend that to him because that was just amazing. And then finally, another piece of good news. I want to highlight the hard work of a group of people who don't get much public recognition. In case you don't know it, our purchasing office is one of the nation's best. In fact, the National Procurement Institute just awarded the team the 2023 Achievement of Excellence in Procurement Award. This is the 12th consecutive year the team has won the award and the 14th time overall. Our team is one of just 25 school system units across the United States and Canada to win this award. So congratulations to each and every single one of those members in our procurement team. Mr. President, this concludes the superintendent's report.
Thank you, Dr. Bedell. And so now we're going to move on to item 5.01, presentation, fiscal year 2025 capital budget and 6-year plan, capital improvement plan. Dr. Bedell.
Thank you, Mr. President. At this time, we will have 2 of our staff members who will come up to present and will provide their names for the record. I do want to make sure that as we look at the fiscal 2025 capital budget and 6-year capital improvement plan, that the board and the community, that you all are fully aware that we will conduct a workshop on the 18th of September to go deeper into this. So this presentation today is more of an informational presentation. And then as we head towards the next 2 weeks, any thoughts, any questions, any concerns, we can make sure that we get those addressed before or during the actual workshop. So I'll pass this over to our staff now.
Thank you, Dr. Bedell. For the record, Bill Heiser, Chief Operating Officer.
Kyle Ruff, Director of Facilities.
And thank you, Dr. Bedell. We're here to join you today on behalf of Dr. Bedell to present you the capital budget. And it's presented in documented form, as you see on the screen. And we'll go through a high-level review of this. This year's capital budget, but the recommendation is for $234.5 million to the board that contains construction funding for 3 major secondary schools that begin the final phase of the Old Mill feeder system project. Nearly $167 million contained in this budget, 71%, is construction funding for the new Center of Applied Technology North, CAT North, a new Old Mill High School, and a new Old Mill Middle North. When complete, the new CAT North building will be on the same site as the new Old Mill School facility in Millersville, while the new Old Mill Middle School North building will be situated on the current CAT North site. So I'd like Mr. Roof here, Director of Facilities, to take you through a few items and details within this budget.
Sure. So as mentioned, this is an informational item, no action required today. Board workshop will be on the 18th at 6 p.m. where we'll have staff available to answer any additional questions that you have. And then a final vote is required on the 20th. This is to be submitted to the IAC October 4th, and it follows kind of a different timeline than the operating budget, more expedited. As far as priority order, on the left side of the screen, you can see the FY25 priority order, 1 through 24. We have a couple new projects that have been added to the CIP this year. One is notably the number 9, which is a sustainability initiative. It's really it's designed to be a revolving fund where we would be able to take BGE rebates and other grant opportunities that we receive and be able to do more sustainable projects, including lighting controls, air conditioning controls, building automation controls, and really start tackling some of the backlog that we have associated with sustainable projects. The next new project is number 11, which would be a school bus facility or lot, and that's for feasibility and design. And that's really to not only replace the Millersville complex where transportation is at right now, but also provide a new training facility for our buses that we own currently within the district. At the same time, we're looking at EV infrastructure for that lot, and that would be a component that we would look at for the feasibility and design. And then number 12 is the BOE project program planning. That's really to get us ahead with our planning and studies that we need to do as a district. That includes what we call the MGT study, but is really a long-term plan. And that process is really going to start in haste in FY25. So we want to have enough funding available where we can get ahead of that. And then it's also going to allow us to advance feasibility studies on future projects where we're not waiting for fiscal year constraints to get an early start. Historically, that has hampered our completion schedule on some of our projects, where if we can get design funding and design start July 1, we have a better chance of opening the school early, which allows a more smoother transition to all those new facilities. And then the rest of the items are really recurring projects. And then, as Mr. Heiser mentioned, or Dr. Heiser mentioned, large capital projects.
Thank you. This concludes our presentation. We'll turn it back over to Mr. Silkworth.
Thank you, Dr. Heiser. Michelle Hunt.
I just wanted to say that I'm delighted to see those 2 new line items, you know, how I feel about sustainability, and then the bus lot facility feasibility and design study straight out of the Gibson report from years back, and something that's long overdue because we both know that Millersville site is subpar. I think that's being polite. Yeah. So thank you so much for this, and I look forward to the workshop.
Ms. Ellis?
Thank you. Yes, thank you for the presentation, but especially the work that your team does every year to put this together. I know this is not the time to really ask questions and dig in deep, but I guess to give you a little preview of what's on my mind. We recently opened a high school a couple of years ago. We're opening one next year. And then now we have another one, which West County, it's my neck of the woods, and I'm glad to see that project getting its start. But all of that without opening any middle schools, and I'm just wondering how that's possible. So I'm going to be asking some questions about that in our workshop.
Yeah, yeah, we'll be prepared to have that discussion. I'm in agreement. So it's just something we have to figure out.
Ms. Crocodile?
Well, Miss Ellis' comments got me to thinking. I'm wondering, I've seen, and even as late as January from the county, we haven't been focusing a lot on that 5-year on the CIPs. And I think it would be great for us to start to have those conversations of what the outlying years entail. We spend a lot of time on the current years, but good planning results in things like having seeing opportunities and seizing them. And when we're talking about funding with our partners, whether it be county or state, I would like to become a little more well-versed in what our 5-year plan does look like from a capital infrastructure perspective, so that we can maybe get a little bit ahead, recognizing it take a couple years to get some forward traction if we need to focus on any one of these initiatives a little further. So I know that's another slide that you have there in the back.
So
But
pages.
rather than go through it, I just would suggest maybe during the workshop, we could do that, because that's also, I think, helpful for the residents to understand what their taxpayer dollars are going to be planned for in the upcoming years. And I think we can have more maybe concrete conversations and maybe get a little more traction on our CIP program,
Yeah.
on the
And,
programming for the school.
And just for reference for those watching, pages 2 and 3 of this slide deck shows the out-year plans, also including the participation by the state.
Yeah, because when we get feedback from the county, rarely do we see that. Yet I know the counties, every single department, when I chaired the Planning Advisory Board, we spent about an equal amount of time in the out years as we did in the current years. And I'd like to get us back to that position, because that position helped us weather the recession in the county. And that type of approach, I think, helped overall restore the agency's solvencies and fidelity as it relates to funding and bonds and where we're going with Blueprint. We're going to have a lot of data thrown at us too, as it relates to community schools, those who are not eligible but still need the same level of requirements. So looking forward to the workshop. And lastly, thank you guys for a bunch. And this is a transition and new opportunities within our organization structures. So thank you guys for keeping it rolling. And that's hard to do amidst all of that. So I greatly appreciate it and look forward to working together with everyone.
Thank you.
Ms. Stent?
Good afternoon. My question is really controlling HVAC, in HVAC initiative. Where in the budget are we? I see the maintenance backlog, but the priority of HVAC on various different schools, where is that in the budget?
HVAC is really funded through a couple different sources. We have a maintenance backlog reduction, which is really smaller HVAC replacement projects. And then we have larger scale, which is in the building systemics, and that's a state funded program. So it's usually a 50-50 split between them. Right now, we're currently starting Lindale Middle School. We've just finished up North County a year ago, and also working on Bates Middle School.
And then the last question is, do you have a list of priority of the school that I can get so that I know what schools, so I can not ask
Later in this meeting, we'll have the comprehensive maintenance plan, which details our priorities and needs.
Thank you.
Seeing no more lights, gentlemen, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And now we're going to move into item 5.02, presentation and virtual day instruction plan for inclement weather. Dr. Bedell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We will have two of our cabinet members who will come up and present virtual day instruction plan for our inclement weather, very similar to what was proposed to you all as a board and the community last year. So I'll pass it over.
Good afternoon, Vice President Silkworth, members of the board, and Dr. Bedell. For the record, I am Monique Jackson, Deputy Superintendent.
And I'm Chief Communications Officer Bob Mosier. We're here to present item 5.02, Virtual Day Instruction Plan, for your information today. First, it is important to understand that the pathway set forth by the Maryland State Department of Education for the 23-24 school year, as was the case last year, is not for sustained virtual instruction of students. Rather, it is a pathway that enables local school systems to have the flexibility to repurpose certain days where it is prudent and to keep the end of the school year closer to the beginning of June. You may recall this board approved a pathway last year that followed Dr. Bedell's recommendation to use the virtual days at his discretion in place of inclement weather days. Fortunately, we did not have a need to do that last year. The MSDE pathway allows for the repurposing of up to 8 instructional days. Virtual instruction can be synchronous or asynchronous, in other words, live or in a recorded fashion, but no more than 3 instructional days can be asynchronous. The use of a virtual day for any grade or grade band will also count as one of the school system's virtual days. Synchronous days must include at least 4 hours of virtual instruction for all students, and our schedules satisfy that requirement. The MSDE pathway also mandates that attendance will be taken for all students and teachers on each virtual day. Virtual days cannot negatively impact the student's grade. There must be meaningful opportunities for students to make up work outside of virtual learning. And importantly, the pathway stipulates that no employee's pay will be negatively impacted by the decision to have a virtual day. This includes custodians, cafeterias, and workers in those categories. The days that school systems can consider for virtual instruction, as was the case last year, include inclement weather days, staff professional development days, parent-teacher conference days, and religious observance days. But also, as was the case last year, Dr. Bedell and the team are again asking the board to consider and ultimately approve a plan for 23-24 that includes the use of virtual instruction days only for inclement weather days. The timeline to enact this plan is as you see on the screen. First, the plan must be presented to the board prior to the opportunity for public comment. This presentation meets the first part of that requirement, and the plan will be posted online later today and opened up for public comment through Friday, September 15th. That comment will be presented to this board in advance of your September 20th meeting, when we will be asking for your approval of the plan. Subsequent to your approval, we will send the plan to MSDE for Superintendent Chaudhry's approval.
Students in grades 3 through 12 and all instructional staff will be expected to take devices home daily to be able to use in the event of a virtual day. Students in pre-kindergarten through grade 2 have devices at home and do not transport them to and from school. In the case of inclement weather, the superintendent will decide if a virtual day is to be used at all, and if a virtual day is to be used, whether instruction will be synchronous or asynchronous. Virtual days will count as both teacher work days and student instructional days, regardless of whether instruction is synchronous or asynchronous. The benefit to this plan is that it allows our school system, when it is prudent to do so, to continue instruction and not add days to the end of the school year to make up for inclement weather in order to meet the state's 180-day requirement. But as Dr. Bedell has made clear last year, this does not automatically mean the end of what many have termed the good old-fashioned snow day. There may well be circumstances that make virtual instruction impractical, or the circumstances just may be right for a snow day for students and staff.
Just one final point. If a virtual day is to be used, whenever possible, the intent to do so and the type of virtual day intended to be used will be communicated to families and staff in advance. With that, we'd be happy to try to answer any questions you have.
Ms. Frank?
Yes, thank you. So I just want to go, I love that we're keeping, the focus on snow days. I love that we have that. Every year we tend to have at least 1 or 2 days where half the county gets rain and the other half gets ice. And we have a lot of parents who complain about that. So when we have those particular patterns of weather where, it's either all ice or half ice, that would be where we're really looking at these virtual days. Is that correct?
So, sort of.
So let me
Yeah.
rephrase the
So-
question. The difference is we have fluffy, fun snow to play in versus weather that is just nasty.
So I like the weather that is nasty descriptor. I hesitate on the ice descriptor because ice takes down phone lines, which takes
Okay.
down computer signals, right, and all that stuff. So you have a really icy day, you could end up with a good old fashioned snow day, right?
Okay.
But I think Dr. Bedell's been really clear to staff, and he was clear at this presentation last year that he's not looking to end snow days for students
Okay.
and staff.
And then I guess, so I know at one point we had a hurricane that came through and we had a school that was shut down. If one school is shut down, do we have a virtual for the whole system? And do we have an idea of that?
So we ask for emergency waivers for single school
Okay.
situations like that. But we had situations last year. You may remember that there was a very bad wreck on the Severn River Bridge last year. We flipped the entire Broadneck cluster to virtual. So we have that flexibility to do that.
Great. Thank you so much.
I think what's important is we're not going to take a cookie cutter approach to how we make these decisions when you have a oh man, I forget the square mileage. I asked you for that and you gave me the data. A whole lot. So we're just not going to take a cookie cutter approach to the decisions that we're going to make on how something that may impact a cluster versus the entirety of the system.
Okay, Ms. Corkadal.
So I was one of those no votes last year. Yeah. No.
Yeah.
Imagine that. But that stated, I mean, I guess one of my concerns is, and we experience it in a variety of different emergencies, is that our first responder families are barely scrambling to pull together cohorts to watch their children. At the same time, our teachers, many of them have families. And then we also have necessary workers, both at the federal, state, and local level. My memory serves, we're somewhere in the upper 20s, if not under 30s that's the profile of our community. And so I know that there's no penalty, but I am a little concerned, especially in the through second grade, for example, that would absolutely 110% require a parent, not a babysitter, to be involved. Because if the babysitter is babysitting, which is normally that teenager, that middle and high schooler who's filling in, because mom and dad, their businesses still have to operate. And some of our families operate some of the businesses themselves, not just our workers. So when I look at the front line and the 12-hour shifts and Snowmageddon and stuff, for example, I still do have reservations and would like to understand a little bit more about what that curriculum would look like, and then how do these other kids basically, they can make up the homework, but they can't make up the instruction time, and how many that's affecting. Because when I do my math, it's about a third of our student population affected. So I would be curious to see a little bit more expanded on that to better understand it, because that's where I hear the complaints about is I can't be on the front line during that emergency, during that hurricane especially, or during that Snowmageddon incident. I mean, we're not talking about the one-off day necessarily. Those are last-minute calls, right? But when we're talking about, one day, maybe 2 days in a row, what is that looking like, and what are we doing to help that 30% roughly?
Are you saying in terms of the actual families or the educators?
Both,
Both.
because they're families too. And so one of the challenges we had when we had to do the shutdown and go to virtual was the first line workers. They needed to have childcare that actually had the ability to help their student with their learning, with their tools and everything else. And so that's where they opened up partial childcare during COVID, during the onset of COVID. But also we had teachers who were struggling because they can't watch their own kids and teach at the same time. So I was just wondering what level of rigor we're talking about and what those expectations are in that broader sense, understanding the case by case, just as we move forward with the conversation, because I don't have a good answer for them. Federal workers too, necessary people. I just think of all that group, and that's like the bulk of my community
Yeah,
where I live. So
You all
know.
aren't going to like this answer.
I like
It-
always
it-
an honest
I mean,
answer,
but
so
you're going to
thought
get an
maybe,
honest
okay.
answer from me.
Yeah. I'm good.
Like, honestly, it's impossible to account for every single variable. It's just not practical. I mean, I lived through COVID like many other superintendents. The virtual aspect of it all wasn't as perfect as it needed to be. I think as a school district, we have a responsibility to assess damage in particular areas and to try to operate with some level of compassion in the decisions that we're going to make on how that impacts those who are delivering instruction in addition to those who have to receive instruction. But I mean, I don't know a single system that's going to be able to give you an answer of we're going to be able to control for variables A through Z. It's just not possible. And that's the answer I have, right?
So part of my question is really, what does the instruction look like?
I'll let you answer that.
Because that's where I'm getting at, because people they look at this and they think of their last recent episode of it. And then the last bigger episode prior to that was Snowmageddon, which got really weird with the sidewalks, especially in the middle part of the county where people had always relied on contractors and weren't willing to go out and shovel, quite frankly. But understanding what that instruction looks like, I think would help alleviate people who do have had concerns and would be apt to just say, well, I'm going to have to skip it anyways, which we don't want happening with our kids.
So I will answer several parts of your question. The first part is we've always been, since I've been part of the school system, which has been over 40 years, we've never been a punitive school system. And so as such, we will continue to work with students and families to meet their individual needs, just like if they were absent for any other reason for that particular day. So that's the first piece. The second piece is, remember, the purpose of this type of instructional plan is for continuity of instruction. Its intended purpose is not really to introduce new learning. It's for simple continuity. So there will be a lot of self-paced options, especially at the secondary level. The third piece of that, and I think probably the most important piece, is the plan affords our superintendent the opportunity to decide between synchronous and asynchronous instruction. And your asynchronous instruction could be an option for those cases that you're talking about, where it doesn't have to be a student logging on at a particular time. They can log on and get the help with the parent as needed. And so I think those are the pieces, but I really want to stress the first part of it. We are not a punitive school system. And as such, we're going to continue to work with families. And if that's not happening, I would just ask that every member of the board or public, please make sure that you reach out to the school principal and we will make adjustments as needed.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't have the opportunity to dry run it. So I'm, still, but that hesitation, I think maybe in communication, as we continue this conversation, to have that sort of communication, that this is not because parents looked at that and my feedback was like, are you kidding me? So I got to take a day off, and I got this middle schooler here at home and now I've got to take a day off because we're going to be rolling out instruction. And they got used to the real and hardcore instruction in virtual, I think. And, when I look at those duration things, that's where it gets, I think there's we would benefit from expanding a little bit more on what that could look like.
And I'm a historian, not a meteorologist, but as Mr. Mosier pointed out earlier today, didn't have to utilize this option. And I'm hoping, and I know hope is not a way to run a business, but I'm hoping that this will be something that we use few and far between, and that we will continue to utilize instruction as we see it now. But the purpose is it's an option if we have the hurricane, the September hurricane, or the Snowmageddon from 2010.
Well, we are a little past due on that big age thing. So let's hope we're granted some grace for a few more years.
Thank you.
Ms.
from
Ellis.
Mother Nature.
Thank you. I'm encouraged by the plan. I think I like the flexibility of it all. The one thing I don't see in there is how to actually create one of those old-fashioned snow days, because it seems like it's been a long time. So, Ms. Jackson, while you're not a meteorologist, I think you might have to be a god to make that happen. But it's been a long time.
I know it has been in my last experience when I lived in Severn, when I was working in Baltimore County. We had a snowstorm where we were out of school for 8 days. So I think I would rather end school early in June and let people start their vacation than to have a single snow day. But they are fun. They are fun. Make no mistakes about it.
Mr. Lynn.
So for required attendance taking, so that includes for asynchronous instruction as well, or just synchronous instruction?
That's a good question.
So the requirement for attendance taking?
Yeah.
Right. So if you log on, right, then the teacher can tell that you logged on and worked on your asynchronous piece.
Oh, okay,
Yes.
gotcha. And then so when you say that that it can't impact a student's grade negatively, so if a student weren't able to log on or join for any reason, whatever instruction takes place or assignments that are assigned during that synchronous or asynchronous time can be made up at a later time with no points taken off or anything?
Yeah, the state pathway says there has to be a meaningful opportunity for students to be able to do what you just described.
Okay, cool.
Okay, seeing no more lights, I would say there's good news and bad news. Maybe the bad news for Ms. Ellis and some others is that those good old snow days maybe seem like they're gone. As somebody that remembers what Dr. Bedell says, those snow days were really stress breakers. They were enjoyed, but we often paid the price. And today we don't have to pay the price because continuity of instruction is assured by our virtual day. So thank you so much.
Thank you, team.
So we're going to move on to our consent items, awarding of contracts. Now, normally we would have a bundle.
I would like to
Look.
motion to bundle items
Uh,
6.01
before
to
you do that,
610.
I have had a request not to include item 6.06 in the bundle.
I mean, I want to bundle all of them, but we can take it to a vote or not. But it doesn't preclude members.
Okay, well, you
questioning.
can make your motion.
Yeah, I want to move that we bundle items 6.01 to 6.10.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, Ms. Corkadell.
I guess what I'm going to say is if a member would like to single out, I do not understand why we would not be willing to support that, just like we're willing to support any other motion by a second to do so. So I'm going to be a no for this bundle because it was a request made, it was made reasonably, and it would not have taken near as long as it's going to take me to now talk about it. So I just don't think that's in the spirit of supporting one another.
Okay, I do not see any other lights. Shall we vote?
Ms. Frank?
My light's on. My light is on.
Oh,
Sorry.
oh, okay, Miss Ellis.
I'm sorry. Have we determined which item or items someone does not want to bundle? If that was mentioned, I didn't hear it.
Yeah, 6.06.
Yes, it
Okay.
was item 6.06.
All right. So we have a motion on the table. Can I offer an amendment to bundle all items from 6.01 to 6.10 except for 6.06?
Second.
Okay. So we have an amendment to bundle everything with the exception of 6.06. I'm looking to see if we have any lights and seeing none. Ms. Howe?
Ms. Frank?
Aye.
Ms. Ellis?
Aye.
Ms. Corkadell?
Aye.
Ms. Schallheim?
Nay.
Ms. Dent?
Aye.
Mr. Lynn?
Nay.
And Mr. Silkworth?
Aye.
5-2, motion passes.
Okay, so now I think we have a motion to bundle item 6.01 to 6.10, excluding item 6.06. And I do not see any lights. Ms. Howe?
Ms. Frank?
Aye.
Ms. Ellis?
Aye.
Ms. Corkadell?
Aye.
Ms. Schallheim?
Aye.
Ms. Dent?
Aye.
Mr. Lynn?
Aye.
Mr. Silkworth?
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0.
Okay, Dr. Bedell?
All right, so the superintendent recommends that the Board of Education authorize the award of contracts dotted 6.01 through 6.05 and 6.07 through 6.10 for the board to approve those award of those contracts.
So
So moved.
Seeing no lights.
Can we have a second, please?
Second.
We have a second? Yes. Okay, seeing no lights, Ms. Howe?
Ms. Frank?
Aye.
Ms. Ellis?
Aye.
Ms. Corkadell?
Aye.
Ms. Schallheim?
Aye.
Ms. Dent?
Aye.
Mr. Lynn?
Aye.
Mr. Silkworth?
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0.
Okay, so that does leave us with item 6.06, Social Emotional Skills Program.
Mr.
Dr. Bedell.
President, Superintendent recommends that the Board of Education authorize the award of contract number 24-075, Stop and Think Social Skills Program, and to Project Achieve Educational Solutions in the amount of $203,700.
So moved.
We have a second. Ms. Corkadell.
Yeah, I had a couple questions. I had a chance to kind of dig in a little bit on the competencies of the program and stuff, of what was readily available to me. And it looks like there's been some enhancements since its first launch in the early 2000s of the program. I think it's actually been around since the 90s. But I guess my question is, and I kind of thought we were already doing this, but what I'm curious of is how much is being the program in and of itself. It's sort of a plug and play in its whole. It allows for evaluation of what we're doing, integration into the general curriculum of strategies and coping strategies, resiliency, and makes you stronger approach. And that positivity is definitely something that we need, more positivity. I do agree with. But in observation of how our district has traditionally deployed some of these, the feedback from the students, especially in the upper grades, and with the parents, I guess more in the undergrades, because, you know, they don't have that level of communication skills built in yet, is that we kind of sort of stutter stalled into one aspect of it. And what I'm wondering is this a continuation of what we're already doing, or is this going to be that reboot approach, which I was not necessarily clear on. And honestly, with all these contracts and stuff we bundle all the time, I do not have a recall whether this is a renewal or not, and that I may have in the past. But when I did take a look at it, it seems to be more holistic than what we have traditionally done in that SEL environment.
Right. And so let me make sure I'm understanding. Are you talking about the Stop and Think program or the Concentra program?
I'm talking
Concentric.
the social emotional skills program, the Stop and Think
Okay.
stuff, the specifically.
All right. So as far as whether this is a build on, I mean, I know there's a number of programs that over the years the school district has deployed. And what we do have a request around what are some of the programs that we've added over the last 2 years that were approved by this board, in addition to personnel related to those initiatives. And we will work to get a response to the full board on what we have done. But just to make sure people understand for the community's consumption, let me kind of talk a little bit about what this program is. The Stop and Think Social Skills Program is a program for every elementary teacher to teach and reinforce students interpersonal problem solving and conflict resolution skills and interactions. So there's a lot of things that we have to do on the front end to address conflict resolution before it becomes a major problem when they hit middle school and high school. This also will help us to establish positive, safe, supportive, and consistent school climates and settings. This is one of the programs that was recognized by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration as an evidence-based program, evidence-based model program, prevention program back in 2000. So I know that there's been some updates to it where we've been able to modernize based on the current state of education. So what the purchasing of this program will do is, number one, it aligns with the post-entry plan. As you all know, in that plan, we talked a lot about at all 17 listening and learning tours. We had a slide that talked about social, emotional, and academic growth for all students. So this, in essence, will allow for us to help utilize this program to address the student wellness and some of the discipline development needs of our kids. The program also supports the work of the Office of Educational Options and School Climate to foster a positive school climate. It was selected, as I said earlier, because it is based on research. It is a nationally recognized program, and there's a lot of positive results that we've seen in the data that justifies that this is something that we should utilize in our school district. And here's the reality of it, because I know conversations will come up around existing materials of instruction. Currently, AACPS does not have existing materials of instruction that provides the same focus on directly teaching interpersonal problem solving and conflict resolution behaviors using a social learning theory approach. And explorations with all of this has been ongoing. It began in spring of 2023 as part of coordinating early intervening services as a grant addressing disproportionality for students also with disabilities. I think what's also important for me to mention, right, we have a requirement. It's not even the work that we want to do within how we build out our strategic plan, but it's a requirement in Blueprint that we absolutely have to focus on social emotional learning and putting in programs that will allow for us to adhere to the law. And so, you know, we have a phenomenal team that has done some significant vetting. of this program. And I also know, if I'm not mistaken, I don't think I have my notes with me, but as far as some of the work that we've done here, you know, when we think about the Health Commission and some of the work that a motion actually came from this school board around the importance of us making sure that we are nurturing and developing our students from a social and emotional standpoint. I think this goes along in those lines of supporting initiatives that are already on the books here in AACPS, in addition to both the state requirements and the requirement of the law.
Thank you, because one of my big factors is this something that we are renewing or not? Because I know that we have many opportunities to improve on what we're doing currently. And what I didn't want was an investment where we're only using a partial of this, because the whole program in and of itself has evaluation. How are we achieving our outcomes? And opportunities to establish what those outcomes are. And I saw a couple samples from the districts, and where they actually went through and did a little grid thing that says, okay, what category is it and what do we want out of that objective? But that was more holistic. If we're only for the elementary, there's a lot of self-awareness embedded in its core. I presume, is this going to be because in elementary school, you just have your subject matters. How is this more of a teacher integration? Because there's a lot of this that has to do with teacher modeling and the teacher's approach, not using negatives, like don't blurt things out, instead say, please raise your hand and wait to be called upon. And that's some of the core foundation of some of these things. So I guess in implementation, is this more of a toolkit for the teachers as opposed to because it's not a new curriculum, because it's, how are we going to be integrating it, I guess is the bottom line. Because honestly, a lot of discussion about oneself and belonging and emotions are great foundations if you take that and apply it to something. And that seems to have been our missing piece, is the application and what happens thereafter. So I think this looks like it could be that answer to that second leg, and I see Miss Jackson here.
For the record, Monique Jackson, Deputy Superintendent. And I think you're absolutely on the right track, Ms. Corkadell. What we know about students and their ability to be ready for school, we know that they can only learn if they have certain behaviors that are in place that afford them that opportunity. And this is sort of helping them with that. We wanted to get to the early learner, our elementary students. And again, our teachers will be equipped. We're not just going to give them a pamphlet and say, go forth. They'll be equipped, and it will be a collaboration with our professional school counselors as well to hit on, when you take a look at the triangle of student needs, to take a look at that second tier and the bottom of the lower tier, so that our students are making good choices and having replacement behaviors, especially behaviors that manifest early on to appear to be bullying. And so we want to make sure that they continue to work through that.
And let me just add on to this, because there's a question that you asked around, is it a renewal? And it's not a renewal, it is an enhancement. So it really goes back to what you said around us making sure that we're providing holistic services across the board to support our students. I think it's also important for me to just make this statement just around, the importance of us making sure that we're developing all of our students socially and emotionally. And I know that there's a lot of conversation around the country that, this is just another way of, I think people, I'm just going to call it what it is. Like, are we out here trying to indoctrinate kids through social and emotional learning or through equity work? And this has absolutely nothing that falls in that arena. I think for us as a school district, we are fully aware of the damage that was conducted as a result of COVID. And we saw it all around the country with a lot of the social and emotional distress that not only students were showing up with, but adults. When you have to shut down our way of living and our way of life, I think it's impacted all of us as a whole. But I've said this to people, it's always, in my opinion, would be educational malpractice, in my opinion, as a school district, to work to address some of the social and emotional learning needs of our students. Because what I do know, that if the social and emotional aspect of the development of students aren't being met, it's curtains on academics. It will always be an impediment to these kids being able to achieve their full academic potential. And I think we just have to make sure that, as a district, one of our core beliefs is that we are making sure that we're meeting the needs of our kids across the board. And so, that's just where I am with it. And I think, I want to just put that out for the record, and we can have conversation on it.
Thank you. I have no more questions for staff. Thank you guys for your thoroughness. And I do have a couple comments before we go to vote, but my understanding this is the questions round, so I'll hold back until
Ms.
we're ready
Ellis.
for comment.
I don't have questions. I had a little comment.
Okay. Ms. Frank? Okay, Ms. Shalham, your light was on.
Yeah, it's not on anymore.
Okay. Okay, so we do have a motion that has been seconded. And I see some lights on for comments. Ms. Ellis?
Thanks. Just real quick. Obviously, this is a deep topic. I do think we need a little further discussion. I would like to see a presentation in the future, if not a workshop. Philosophically, I've been very clear where I stand as a board member and as a parent, which is that, to me, the social emotional needs of our kids is the first priority. But I also have been very clear that I don't think you can develop a child socially, emotionally through an academic lesson. That it mostly happens through opportunity for regular interaction and real-time consequences and opportunities for growth in that way. So I would like us, to dig a little deeper into this. I'm supporting the requests today, but just pointing out that this is something that I do think needs a little more conversation. Thanks.
Thank you. Ms. Frank?
Yes, I was not going to participate, but you said let's have a conversation, so I wanted to throw my voice in here as well. You mentioned, Dr. Bedell, that we're seeing around the country that parents are saying that this leads to indoctrination, and that's the fear. So I will comment to that piece. My concern is not that we're indoctrinating our kids with this particular piece. My concern is a holistic approach to if we have students who need greater support, and that has always been the mission after COVID, is we have students who have greater needs for support that we need to wrap our arms around them. That's what we said after COVID, and we need to find them and we need to support them because there are emotional needs that are not being met. But what I'm seeing is this shift into let's have social emotional learning for all children. And that is my concern, is that we're broaching into a system-wide approach to that. I do support having mental health supports for students who need them. I'm just concerned that we're going further down that path than we need to. So it was a very simple concern. It was, I apologize. I moved this weekend and I have not had Wi-Fi, so it's been really difficult to get in touch with folks. So I did try to just briefly let you know this morning that I had concerns. I'm going to reach out to you a little bit more later, and we will have these conversations a bit more later. But I did not mean to go down this rabbit hole today, and I do apologize. So thank you.
No, not a problem. And I think that's part of the board's responsibility to question things. And I think it's good for community consumption. Like we have to have these conversations. And, I think for me, I've said this before, there's a number of requirements that are also being imposed on our school districts where we're constrained. I mean, we have to focus on these things. And I think for us, making sure that whatever portfolio or whatever menu of options that we have, that we're able to really help kids wherever they are and how they show up, right? And I think these programs are some examples of what could help kids. I think I hear what you're saying. We do have students who may not need it, so why subject them to this? But I think a lot of this is also just some of this stuff is just about common decency that you want every human to be able to display, right? How you talk to people, how you react when you run into conflict. How do you go out and help people who may be experiencing issues? And I think it's bigger than it's all about school climate. It's all about community climate, having care and compassion for each other. And I've said this, man, I don't know how many times I've said this in listening and learning tours. I feel like we've become kind of callous and cold-hearted to some of the things that are happening in this world and happening in this community. And how do we bring back love and compassion, to this world? And we think that being able to help educate kids on understanding how to cope positively, not rely on having to defer to alcohol and drugs or violence and abuse. So I think the holistic aspect of what Ms. Corkadell was talking about, like we got to figure out holistically, how do we make sure that we're helping all of our people properly cope and then to be able to live a healthy life where, we don't have the bullying, we don't have the thoughts for suicide and all of those things. And it is very complex because sometimes I feel like, all of the problems of the world have to be solved by school districts, and school districts should not, all of this burden shouldn't be placed on us, but it's a reality of what is being placed on us, where some of this stuff, really the community has to own more of it, the community organizations and agencies. And I think, so we have to figure out a balance. That's basically what I'm saying to you.
Ms. Crocodile?
Well, to piggyback off of that, that's a lot, but a good visual. I agree with Miss Ellis. I was going to, part of my remarks was very similar in kind. It has been historically sort of an oversight that is persistent as it relates to follow up on some of our programmatics. And I remember when we adopted the GCC, for example, there was matrix for success, and we were going to be seeing reductions in bullying and the like in those older grades was anticipated. We commissioned a mental health task force. The last report we heard was in November of 2020 when I had invited them to come. And so I think the board would benefit from being able to better support the programs we have in place with a little bit more information, but most importantly, the follow-up, like what are our anticipated outcomes, and then are we actually achieving them? And I think that's important because what I'm hearing and sensing even is that there's a little hesitation because we have not demonstrated success outwardly in the programs. We may have seen it and we're starting to make progress towards it, but our ability to demonstrate that success, I think, will be key. And I'll also just say, in that fundamental respect of human to human, that starts right up here. If we want our students to support their fellow students' ideas, inspirations and dreams, we need to give them the space to do so. And so, like we just did here, by allowing members to have a more deep conversation about this particular item, I think it's important that we start being willing and not so shy to have these harder conversations, because what we do up here reflects what's going on out there. And that's why sometimes I do get a little frustrated and a little bit under duress when I see our adults commingling, whether it's in a board meeting or in different events, or especially on social media, of adults being mindful that we're being watched and we're being imitated. So if how to advocate for something, there's healthy ways, there's unhealthy ways. That gets back to the core of programs like this. So I would like to see what Ms. Ellis had mentioned, that I would prefer it to be more of an outcome-based and give us a school season to see. So I'm going to be a yes, in so much as I'd like to see this piloted and then see if it is working for us, or if we can take it, adjust it for our needs. Because as I said, I think people are feeling a little bit of indigestion when you say SEL, when you say DEI, there's a little bit of indigestion going on, because the definitions are pretty far apart of individuals and of folks. So giving us something that is solid, steady Eddie, proven, data-driven, and foundational in positivity, yes. Now, does it get deployed that way? That's the part I'm curious to see. And is it going to best meet our needs?
I think from a data standpoint, this is something that we talked about in cabinet yesterday. Just as we think about initiatives and programs that we bring into this school district, we do have a responsibility to evaluate those programs. But as we are in the process of going through this strategic planning, one of the things that I've shared with you all in the community is part of this strategic plan is an accountability metric that will be included in the form of a scorecard. And that scorecard will not only allow for us to populate it with some of the quantitative data from the standpoint of actual numerical outcomes based on state assessments, but there will also be a qualitative component to that scorecard in the form of a survey, where we're able to also now take a look at what people perceptions are of these programs that we have, in addition to then looking at the data. So if we say the purpose of bringing in these social and emotional programs is to help reduce the amount of disciplinary infractions, the amount of fights, the amount, or to address trauma-associated issues, or to address chronic attendance issues, we should be able to see a reflection of the from an efficacy standpoint of these programs in student outcomes that can be measured on that scorecard. So I think we're all in alignment on the accountability of what we're doing here, and to be able to say, if it's working, we continue. If it's not working, we go in a different direction, which I never have a problem doing.
Thank you very much. No further comments.
Thank you. So seeing no more lights, I believe we have a motion that needs to be voted upon. Ms. Howell.
Yes, Ms. Schallheim moved to approve the superintendent's recommendation to approve item 6.06. Ms. Dent seconded. Ms. Frank.
No.
Ms. Ellis.
Aye.
Ms. Corkadell.
Aye.
Ms. Schallheim.
Aye.
Ms. Dent.
Aye.
Mr. Lynn.
Aye.
Mr. Soakworth.
Aye.
Motion passes 6-1.
Just real quick, I think this is something too. I want to make sure people are aware. This is a grant. So this is, like as Ms. Corkadell stated, it's an opportunity for us to be able to beta test something using grant money. And if it works, then I think it's something that we take a deeper look at from a general fund standpoint. But I did want to make sure the community was aware that these are some of the grants that we've been going after to get ahead of some of these blueprint requirements too.
Thank you, Dr. Bedell. So we're going to move on to action items. Item 7.01, I believe we do not have any administrative personnel. So we'll move on to item 7.02, personnel. Dr. Bordeaux.
Mr. President, the superintendent recommends that the board approve the actions as stipulated on the attached sheets as discussed in executive close.
So moved.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. I do not see any lights. Ms. Howe?
Ms. Frank?
Aye.
Ms. Ellis?
Aye.
Ms. Corkadell?
Aye.
Ms. Schulheim?
Aye.
Ms. Dent?
Aye.
Mr. Lynn?
Aye.
Mr. Silkworth?
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0.
Okay, we're going to move on to item 7.03, special education programs for students with disabilities, code IFF, on its third reading.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is our third reading of the policy, and before our staff presents, I'll go ahead and just do the recommendation now. The superintendent recommends approval of policy IFF, subject to final correction for style and format. I'll pass it over
So
to staff.
moved.
Thank you, Dr. Bedell. Good afternoon, Vice President Silkworth and members of the board. I'm Grace Wilson, Legislative and Policy Specialist.
Good afternoon. For the record, Diane McGowan, Director of Specially Designed Instruction and Compliance.
Policy IFF, Special Education Programs for Students with Disabilities, is before you this afternoon on third reading. As a reminder, this policy was last revised May 12th, 2012, and ensures that infants and toddlers and students with disabilities receive a free, appropriate public education and related services in the least restrictive environment appropriate for the child in accordance with federal and state laws and regulations. Specifically, the policy has been revised to reflect that special education services are provided to individuals birth through the end of the school year in which the individual turns 21, reflect best and current practices, and update style and formatting. The policy was posted for an additional public comment period as the result of substantive revisions made by the board during the policy's second reading. No additional public comment was received. Ms. McGowan and I would be happy to answer any questions you may have, and I would just like to note Ms. McGowan has brought her team with her here today, and we'd like to thank them for all their input on the policy.
Ms. Schulheim?
Oh, I'm so glad you brought your team. This was really a joyous policy to work on and enhance with my colleague, Mr. Lynn, last time in collaboration with you and your team. And I'm glad to see this come before us for third vote. I will excitedly say aye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Silkworth, if I could, I just want to thank you all for your hard work, the board for all of the work that you all have done over these first three readings, and to our staff for helping to make sure that we were crafting language that I feel will allow for us to be able to implement this policy correctly, and as we look at our regulations and things of that nature. So thank you all for your hard work.
Ms. Ellis?
I just want to say from the time that I first sat here in 2018 to now, it's night and day as far as this topic goes. I don't want to focus on the negative, but it just felt so contentious at a time, and now it really feels like we're collaborating and coming together with our students and their parents and their needs. And I just thank you all. Thank you all. It's a new day. Thank you.
Thank you. So seeing no more lights, we have a motion. We need to vote. Ms. Howe?
Ms. Frank?
Aye.
Ms. Ellis?
Aye.
Ms. Corkadell?
Aye.
Ms. Schulheim?
Aye.
Ms. Dent?
Aye.
Mr. Lynn?
Aye.
Mr. Silkworth?
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you. So we'll move on to our next item, which is item 7.04, 2024 legislative program. Dr. Bedell.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Superintendent recommends approval of the 2024 legislative program. I know we went over this presentation with you all a couple of weeks ago, and I'll pass it over to Grace for any remarks.
Thank you, Dr. Bedell. Again, for the record, Grace Wilson, Legislative and Policy Specialist. The draft 2024 legislative program is before you this afternoon for approval. The legislative program is the document approved by the board annually that drives advocacy on behalf of the school system during the Maryland General Assembly session with regard to issues related to education and our school system. I'd like to thank all of my colleagues who reviewed and provided feedback on the draft 2024 legislative program. As Dr. Bedell mentioned, it was presented to you August 21st at a board workshop. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions you may have regarding this document.
Ms. Shahheim.
At the appropriate time, I have a motion.
I think Ms. Crocodile, Ms. Ellis, I'm not sure who was first. You're later on. Ms. Ellis.
I'm on for comment, so I'll hold back
I am as
until
well.
we're done with the questions. I'm on comments.
I have a
Okay. Do we have any other questions? Ms. Shahheim, yours is a motion, not a question.
Mine is a motion to approve at the appropriate time.
Okay. So, Ms. Ellis, comments?
Yes, just briefly, I did ask a few questions last time. There are questions that I ask similarly every time we do this. And so while I am not going to not support this program, because what I do appreciate is that this board is quite united on local authority where it belongs for our students. There are areas that I do feel we can improve and tweak a little bit on our legislative program, and I'll be having those conversations, in the coming year, and I hope to, I guess give it a little refresh this time next year. But I just wanted to comment on that because I did ask some questions. I do still have some concerns. Again, we in this position, we represent the community, not the school system. We work with the school system. We collaborate with the school system, and so I just want to make sure our community is fully represented in the program. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you, Ms. Wilson, for your work.
Of course.
Ms. Crocodile.
Yeah, thank you, guys. Thank you so very much. I just want to say this is the direction that I think we need to be to well position ourselves. There's already discussions on legislation. Legislation is actually being drafted as we speak. There are bill writers working on it. Our ability to get our message of what our needs are as an agent, as the local education agency for Anne Arundel, is very, very critical. I do know that at the bigger, broader level, we talk a lot about MABE's legislative priorities here, and that's the Maryland Association of Boards of Education, of course. Those initiatives will be taking place under the new leadership in the coming year to 18 months ahead. And in the meantime, this is probably going to be one of the most critical legislative sessions as it relates to Blueprint. This could very well be that make or break year. So our ability to understand what we are facing, not just what to oppose, but how we can solve the problem. So much of what I'd like to see us in action, our legislative program in action, is, and here's the solution. We do not want legislators that know very little or incidentally through their personal experiences and hearing from 10% of their constituent base to be making decisions on our behalf when we have folks who have an understanding of what the solutions are. So I'm hopeful that this year, not only are we on top of the timeline this year, and thank you so much for listening to that suggestion, but also having a broader understanding than thumbs up and thumbs down. We have to become the educators of our community, not just of our students, but including our students, but in the bigger, broader sense as it relates to legislation, it's up to us up here and in this room to make that happen. So I think this will give us that framework. And if we each focus on our own respective, local district representation to make them more informed, I think we'll have a more productive legislative program. But it's going to be a very engaging one and very interesting. And I guess it's stirrups and saddle up time. But thank you guys so much for doing this. I will be supporting it, of course. Local control is probably going to be under attack more than any other year in decades since the 1950s. So when I say that this is going to be quite a year, all indications is that's already underway. And as more authority is being transitioned from the legislature to the state boards and the AIB and the state superintendent, that local control is going to be a lot more critical than I think people understand. And it's been sliding for years, but this is going to be it's going to be a big year. So all hands on deck, and I know our abled hands are already on deck and ready to roll. So I too, there's some things where I would prefer personally, and I know my district would prefer me not to be supporting, but I think the standing united is very, very important this year. And we can work through some of those little details at a later point. And we can also isolate and pull out portions of that, of the collective consensus versus the simple majority for our purposes too, if need be. But this is going to be a bigger program than it looks like on paper, that's for sure. And thank you guys for being responsive. I'll just say Anne Arundel County, again, leading the way as to making the adaptations to our timelines and getting our foot in the door and making sure our voice is heard early, and often. And people are looking at us again as other districts. So that always brings an extra smile on my competitive face.
All right, thank you, Ms. Wilson. Seeing no more lights for comments, Ms. Shawhan.
You said that you recommended this at the beginning, right? That's what I thought. So I move to approve the 2024 legislative program. Thank you.
Second.
Do we have any comments? Ms. Shawhan, as you... Okay, no comments, saying no lights. Ms. Howe?
Ms. Frank?
No.
Ms. Ellis?
Aye.
Ms. Corkadell?
Aye.
Ms. Schallheim?
Aye.
Ms. Dent?
Aye.
Mr. Lynn?
Aye.
Mr. Silkworth?
Aye.
Motion passes 6-1.
Okay, so we're going to move on to item 7.05, fiscal year 2024 comprehensive maintenance plan. Dr. Bedell.
Thank you, Mr. President. The superintendent recommends approval of the fiscal year 2024 comprehensive maintenance plan.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Do I see any? I don't see any lights. No questions. No comments. Ms. Howe?
Ms. Frank?
Aye.
Ms. Ellis?
Aye.
Ms. Corkadell?
Aye.
Ms. Schallheim?
Aye.
Ms. Dent?
Aye.
Mr. Lynn?
Aye.
Mr. Silkworth?
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you. So we moved to item 8.01, award of contracts. Any questions? Everything okay with that? Okay, fine. So, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to move on to public comments on non-agenda items. If you'll bear with me, please. This is one of the opportunities that the board provides to hear the views and receive the advice of community members. The members of this board appreciate hearing from interested citizens. As appropriate, we will refer your concerns to the superintendent for follow-up by his staff. The board will hear public comment from up to 10 total speakers, combination of virtual and in-person per agenda item, excluding personnel items, reports, and recognitions, although we do not have any testimony this evening on agenda items. The link to register to comment before the board opened at 3 p.m. on the Friday prior to this meeting. Registration closed at noon on the Monday prior to this meeting. Speakers may sign up for no more than 2 agenda items, but only once on any individual agenda item. For any item with more than 10 registered speakers, the board will employ a lottery process to select the speakers. Registrants who secure a slot to speak were notified by email at the email address they provided when they registered. All speakers will be allotted 2 minutes and must address the specifics of the their non-agenda item for which they've signed up. No speaker substitutions will be permitted if your name is called and you are not present. We will move on to the next speaker. For anyone who was not selected to speak at today's meeting, you may email your comments to the board office at boardoffice@aacps.org. While we encourage public input on policies, programs, and practices within the purview of this board and the school system, this is not the proper forum to address specific student or employee matters or to comment on matters that do not relate to public education in Anne Arundel County. We encourage everyone to utilize existing dispute resolution processes as appropriate. I remind everyone that any inappropriate personnel remarks or other behavior that disrupts or interferes with the conduct of this meeting are out of order. Persons using language that is threatening or promotes violence against members of this body or Anne Arundel County Public School employees are subject to legal penalties. Persons who otherwise disrupt or disturb this meeting will not be allowed to continue their remarks and will be asked to leave the meeting. It is not the board's general practice to engage in question and answer session with speakers. For the record, please give your name before speaking. Handouts should be given to the board assistant. I ask that speakers observe the 2-minute clock. A yellow light will shine when you have 30 seconds remaining, and a tone will sound when your time has expired. Please conclude your remarks when you hear the tone. If you continue after your time has expired, the microphone will be turned off. It could also be turned off if a speaker addresses specific student or employee matters or are commenting on matters not related to public education in Anne Arundel County. So I'd like to call up, let me see, we have 2 speakers in person today, Stephanie Cassell and Alexandra Matiela Novak.
Hello. Okay.
Hello.
Hello. Good afternoon. My name is Stephanie Kessel. I recently moved to Anne Arundel County with my 2 children, one who is enrolled in Crofton Woods Elementary School. And I'm here today to ask the board to consider introducing the Be Smart campaign for safe gun storage to Anne Arundel County Public Schools. The purpose of the Be Smart campaign is to raise awareness that secure gun storage can save lives. So 4.6 million kids live in homes with unsecure loaded guns, and 3/4 of school shooters get their gun from home or a relative's home. 40% of teen suicides are by gun. Personally, I lost 2 friends my junior year of high school to suicide. What later followed was a number of additional suicides. I lost a close friend of our family to suicide by gun. And later, a friend of mine who was a very responsible gun owner, had a gun locker, had it secured. He left town and asked his a family friend's son to house sit for him. And before he left, he asked his friend, "Do I need to secure my guns?" And his friend assured him, "No, he was raised around guns, it should be safe." And when he came back, he found that his friend's son had used his gun in his home to end his own life. So that's just all to say that even responsible gun owners can have slip-ups, and the Be Smart campaign would provide that reminder to our families that they have to be vigilant about safe gun storage. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Matiela Novak.
Hello, my name is Dr. Alexandra Mattia Novak. I'm the Be Smart co-lead for Anne Arundel County. Thank you for the time to speak to you all today. I'm here to talk about the issue of gun violence in schools, which has instilled fear in parents, educators, students, and leaders in our community. But we can take action together to help keep our schools safer. One important place to start is by practicing and encouraging secure gun storage in every home. The U.S. Secret Service says that addressing student access to guns is a critical component of any school-based threat assessment intervention plan, and secure storage, which is storing guns unloaded, locked, and separate from ammunition, is a vital way to reduce youth suicides and keep schools safer from gun violence. The Be Smart campaign was developed to reduce the deaths, injuries, and trauma that result when children, students in particular, gain access to unsecured firearms. This program emphasizes that secure storage is always the adult's responsibility and encourages individuals to take 5 simple steps to keep kids and families safer. S is secure guns in homes and vehicles. M is model responsible behavior around guns. A is ask about the presence of guns in other homes. R is recognize the role of guns in suicide. And T is tell your peers to be smart. We have already worked with Board of Educations in Montgomery and Howard County to distribute Be Smart material to all students in those school districts. We understand here for AACPS, it is an operational issue and needs to be decided on by the superintendent, Dr. Bedell. We have so far gathered the support of community members and our local teachers with TAC to distribute this information to our students. We are hopeful that we can implement this under the direction of Dr. Bedell and that you all as a board will support him. As parents, educators, and leaders in our community, we are all responsible for keeping our schools safe. By utilizing Be Smart framework, we all can take an important step towards protecting our kids in our schools. Please do not hesitate to contact me with questions. Thank you. And I do have some handouts for you all, and the information, we have it in English and Spanish.
Yeah, you can give that to Miss Money. Thank you. So at this time, we do have one person testifying virtually.
Now we're going to do public comment on non-agenda items, but from a virtual perspective. Speakers will be allotted 2 minutes each and may not allocate their time to others. Ms. Howell will indicate when your time has expired. The board asks that comments remain civil and appropriate for the various audiences that may be watching or viewing this meeting. Student-specific and personnel matters are confidential and cannot be discussed in this forum. It is not the board's general practice to engage in question and answer session with speakers. For the record, give your name before speaking. And we have one person with us this afternoon, Ms. Lily Ellis. Go ahead. Can you hear me, Ms. Ellis? You can start when you're ready. Ms. Ellis, can you hear me? You can start when you're ready. Ms. Ellis, do you have comments for us this afternoon? Ms. Ellis, you can unmute and begin your comments.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. You may begin.
I can't hear you.
You can begin.
Okay. My name is Lily Ellis. African American boys in Anne Arundel County are at the top of the suspension rate and at the bottom of test scores. This quote is from Dr. Vernell Green, a member of the Maryland State Board of Education. African American males are leading in incarceration rate, lower attendance, and gun violence is the leading cause of death among Black children and teenagers. According to one study, a Black child is 100 times more likely to be shot than a white child. Let's not mention the trauma these children are facing daily. Why not invest more money into an elementary charter school for these communities of poverty? These children need to be taught early by at least kindergarten or first grade. By the time they reach middle school, we have lost them. So many of them can't even qualify for vocational programs in our schools. So why do we want another type of high school when the numbers show most of the Black children need help in the beginning grades? So I'm here to advocate and asking the board to look into an elementary program or charter school to help our kids because high school is too late. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you. So that is the last person to testify. And that does complete our agenda. Do I
Motion to
hear a
adjourn.
motion to adjourn?
Second.
Second. Consensus. Thank you all. Thank you all. Please stay safe. Stay cool. Have a great day.